So I just finished my first full series working with Midjourney, working with AI. And I've played in it a little bit, but this was the first like full solid series that I've done in it. And it brought about a lot of existential questions that I think a lot of photographers, art directors, retouchers, finishers, artists are having right now about AI. And some of those questions are questions that I've had with other like colleagues and people in the industry are, one, is this going to take my job? Two, who's really creating the artwork? Is it me or is it the computer? And three, how quickly is it going to be kind of a regular part of the industry and working with it? And it's interesting. I feel like I've been on the ground floor of disruption in the photo industry. Every time there's a major disruption, I'm like literally at the epicenter of that major disruption. I've been in the photo industry for the last 20 years, and the first round of disruption was when we went from film to digital. When we went from film to digital, I was working at one of the major studios in Los Angeles, Coyote and Smashbox. I say Coyote and Smashbox because Coyote acquired Smashbox for a period of time. It's another story that I won't ever share because it's boring, but it's just an acquisition. But anyways, I was there during the time when we were transitioning from film to digital. And at that time, we had every photographer that was a major working photographer at that time come to the studio. So Mark Seliger, Annie Leibovitz, Martin Scholler, all those photographers coming through. And everyone resisted going from film to digital, like passionately resisted it. And one of the main reasons they didn't want to go from film to digital was because you had to have a monitor on set. All the clients wanted there to be a monitor on set where the photographer is tethered to the monitor via Capture One. And the photographers didn't want it because it changed the workflow. It used to be that the client would trust the photographer to deliver the image that they had agreed upon in their brainstorming sessions, and everybody talked about it on a mood board. The photographer would shoot it, the photographer was trusted, the photographer would deliver. Once there was a monitor on set, the client would then come on set and stand at the monitor and stop the creation process in its tracks before it ever reached its full potential. So an art director, for example, can be looking at a monitor, and as the photographer's shooting, they can be like, yes, more of this direction, or no, let's not do any of that. Meanwhile, the photographer knows that to get what they're wanting out of a subject, sometimes the subject has to be a little bit uncomfortable for a little bit, and then you warm them up through the process, and then you finally reach that golden moment that is magic, right? Where the talent feels comfortable, the photographers kind of worked the different angles, and it's a process to get there. And the creative process can be ugly. So there can be a lot of awkward images that you don't want the talent to see, you don't want the art director to see, and having the client at the monitor prevents that ugly phase from ever happening because they stop it in its tracks before it ever reaches the magic. So there was tons of pushback in the beginning, and then of course the new technology won. I think you see where I'm going with this. So now on any commercial set there is a computer, and you're tethered to the computer, and photographers had to acquiesce to that. The next disruptive phase was when the iPhone came out. So the iPhone came out, and every photographer would say, oh, everybody's a photographer now, and this is going to do away with professionals, everybody's a photographer now, and nobody can take photographers seriously anymore. Did it get rid of the professional photographer? No, it absolutely did not get rid of the professional photographer, but of course professional photographers did not like it, and they resisted it. Artists really don't like change, I'm learning. I like change. I'm someone who embraces it, which you can also kind of see where my conclusion is going to be with this. But yeah, major resistance and pushback from photographers, because it really opened the door to, you can have this thing in your pocket and push a button and there's an image. It didn't stop wedding photographers from shooting weddings. I think people were fearful that like the guests would just show up with their iPhone and take pictures and there would no longer be a professional wedding photographer. That didn't stop. On commercial sets and editorial sets, yes, some photographers once in a while would shoot with their camera, but it was like a novelty thing. It never really became part of the workflow. The third disruption I went through was Instagram. So then when Instagram came out, everybody was like, oh, it's going to be a popularity contest. So it went from having to have the monitor on set to everybody can be a photographer now that there's the iPhone to, oh no, it's going to be a popularity contest because of Instagram. And to some degree, that is true. I met with a number of agents over the years that loved my work. And then they would say, how many Instagram followers do you have? I would tell them, oh, I have like 1,000. And they'd be like, we need you to have 10. So there are times I did not get signed because I didn't have enough Instagram followers. So that one did kind of happen, but I still think that it was a good thing. The reason I think that Instagram is a good thing is because it got rid of the gatekeepers. Like, there are still gatekeepers that make it to where photographers get hired at any magazine or ad agency or studio, but it used to be that the only way the public ever saw your work was if you got it published in a magazine, and you had to get your work published in a magazine for anyone at a studio or these big ad jobs to see your work. Now you get rid of the editorial editor's gatekeeper. You get rid of them being a gatekeeper, and you just publish it on your website, you publish it on your Instagram. I do YouTube. And so that, I think, was a huge plus for photographers. Now the fourth disruption is Midjourney, DALL-E, these GANS, generative adversarial networks that are creating AI artwork. I like this one. I really enjoyed this last series that I created. I think it's just another tool in the toolbox. And the reason for that is the series that I created, and I'm going to share some of it with you now. As you can see, there's a consistent theme, there's a consistent color palette, there's a consistent lighting on it, there's a consistent aspect ratio. I put into the prompts the type of camera I wanted it to, act as when it's creating the image. You can put the type of lens you're wanting to shoot with, you can put the ISO you're wanting to shoot it. What I learned in this process is that this series took me about 40 hours to create. And so people are being negative about this and saying like, oh, you just type prompts in and it creates an image. Yeah, but it doesn't create a good image. If you haven't tried it, go try it out. You'll type in some prompts and it'll create something that's kind of not very good. And yeah, you can get these images where once in a while it'll create something that's amazing. You're like, oh my God, it just typed in a sentence and it created something amazing. But that's the same thing as somebody who's not a photographer picking up a camera, pushing a button and being like, I'm a photographer now, it created something amazing. What makes a professional artist is somebody who knows their craft and knows their tools so well that they can create it every single time on demand for a client. That's what differentiates an amateur who got lucky from a professional. And so what I'm learning and working with GANS is that you have to get really good at prompt engineering so that you can output an entire series or an entire work of art for a client and get a consistent result that is good, that is high quality over and over and over again. And that takes time. It takes time to learn the prompts. It takes time you also have to be an artist to some degree to know what type of lighting to tell it to use, what type of camera you want it to emulate, what lens focal length you want it to use. Like, you kind of almost have to have the foundation of understanding photography or understanding art to even know what prompts to give it, or do a lot of research and do a lot of iterations. So my personal feeling is that it is another tool in the toolbox, and that while on the surface it looks like it's something really easy that's just going to take over everyone's job, I think that there are going to be people who become professional prompt engineers, because it takes a lot of work to get good, consistent results that you can produce for a client over and over and over again. Like, I would offer my services to a client in like, this is the style that I can create for you, and this is what I would be able to provide for you consistently and quickly on a job. So that's kind of how I feel about this AI. Is I feel like this is the fourth disruption I've been through, and once again I'm on the ground floor because I'm working at an ad agency where there are art directors who are going through the same experience that the photographers went through when I was at Coyote and Smashbox when it went from film to digital. So it's a major disruption for art directors. It's a major disruption for the advertising industry, but I think it's going to be the people who embrace it and the people who work with the new technology are going to be the ones that keep working, and the people who resist it are going to be the ones that get left behind. I mean, there are still photographers who shoot film, and there are still photographers who get hired to shoot film, but it's like a novelty. So it's like, oh, we have this, you know, this commercial shoot we want to do that has a film look, we'll hire this photographer. But it's like once in a blue moon, you know, it's not something that I think you can really do on a regular basis. There are some photographers that do it, but you know, it's not very many. It's like 1.01%. So yeah, I think it's another tool in the toolbox. I personally am embracing it, I'm learning it, and I plan to incorporate it in something that I'm gonna offer as a service in the future. There are, for those of you that, I'm sure if you're watching this video, you know this, that Getty is currently suing Stable Diffusion for the data set that they are scraping. My personal opinion on that, and of course I'm not a lawyer and I don't have a crystal ball, I don't know how it's going to turn out, but my personal opinion is that they're not taking the images and then in an image taking like the flower from this image and putting it into this composite. That's not what's happening. It's scanning the image, learning what that flower looks like, and then making that a percentage of this piece of artwork that is other pieces of artwork put together, and none of them are the actual original. So in understanding laws surrounding photography, I feel if I were betting on this, if somebody were like, I want to bet you $100, I would bet $100 or $1,000 that it would fall into transformative work and would then fall into fair use. So my feeling is that that this lawsuit is occurring and that it will eventually get settled. It'll fall into transformative use, and the industry will end up working it out. The industry will end up figuring out how to compensate the artists that their artwork was scraped, or they will end up with the algorithm creating a whole new data set from work that they've paid Getty and Shutterstock for scraping. So I feel like something like that will happen. As far as the technology, I don't think it's going away personally. I would be shocked if it went away. If it did go away, I could see it being like a Napster Spotify situation where, if you don't remember, Napster was making music available for free to people without properly licensing it from the artist. They got sued, Napster went away, Spotify came in afterwards, and Spotify was like, oh, okay, well, based on the new laws that are set in place, I'm gonna create a platform that's very similar that follows all the rules. So I could see that happening. But I don't think the technology is going away. I think the toothpaste is out of the bottle. I think the cat is out of the bag. I think the train has left the station. I think that this technology is here to stay. In regards to like using it commercially, I plan to learn it and develop my skill set in it so that once everything is kind of resolved and settled, I'm ready to go and you know, use my skills. So yeah, that's my take on AI and where I think this new GANS technology is going to implement itself into the industry. I have a few videos here that share what some other people think about it too.
Yeah, we're fucked. This was evidently created by a Facebook Mid-Journey group, and now you can get the AI to make works in progress. So I guess the illusion of sketching it, painting it, highlights, and then final render. All AI art. AI art is definitely something I want to get into eventually, but my general opinion of it is that it's crazy how in like less than a few months we went from this not being a thing to it fully being a thing and like surpassing, exceeding. And again, people tend to forget how fast artificial intelligence learns, because a lot of people are like, well, it can't draw eyes, hands. Well, it learned. Condenses 10,000 hours of learned human experiences into like a few, hours. Roommate who uses AI art, because the people he tries to commission take too damn long. And he can get an AI art program to pump out like 20 different renders of his prompt. And he picks his favorite from that batch. And it takes him like an hour or less.
I'm starting to use AI in the design process. Here's exactly what I'm doing. I work really heavily in product design, both in electronics and in fashion. And now inside the design process, and especially the mood boarding process, we're putting images into the AI engine Mid-Journey. We've been working for a few weeks on refining how we use this, and actually it's producing clothes that we would make, and making photos that are just as good as what we put in the lookbook. A lot of what comes out is interesting, but not actually useful. But what we're doing is essentially incorporating it into the design process at the mood boarding stage and then iterating. So every time we put in an image, we're continuing to refine prompts or the list of words you use to generate an image to find something that's useful. These shoes I showed to start are the first actually useful thing that has come from this, because we are modeling a soul after this AI soul that was generated here. This is an example of the prompts we're putting in to get that kind of imagery, including specifying cameras and specifying design inspiration. I'm not sure quite where this leads, but I'm excited to be trying it.
These AI prompts are getting just insane. Check this out. I wanted it to create a cyberpunk action figure. That's like pretty good. And this is a picture of me. Like, I wanted to be a cyberpunk action figure. That's insane. Now look at this. I wanted a claymation like elf. I don't remember the exact prompts I put in, but I wanted like a clay doll type figure, but I also wanted a lot of texture in it. And the texture you can see in the clothing is just insane. This was a Lego character. I wanted to become a Lego character, and it's like borderline creepy, but it's just wild. And then this one absolutely blew my mind. This was like, I wanted it an old Victorian style and with a lot of depth, and it's just mind-blowing, the details on this one. It's insane. What is all of this leading to? And that's often the question I find myself pondering, because it's kind of scary if you think about it.
I've not shared on my channel up until this point, but this technology did not take me by surprise at all. I learned about GANS years ago because I run a blog called Trust This Robot. I'll leave a link below if you want to check it out. And it is a blog that's all about artificial intelligence. So none of this was surprising to me. I was kind of keeping my eyes out for GANS to make its way to the public, to where we could all use it. And yeah, I'm one of those people who thinks that everything in life is yin and yang. There's polarization to everything. Everything has a plus and a minus, and I think technology is exactly that. It's like you can take a technology and you can work with it and you can use it and make your life amazing if you use it the right way. I think that's the whole thing in life of like staying positive, being positive, staying within the positive energy realm is like, I'm going to use this technology for good. I'm going to try to create beautiful artwork with it. And yeah, the only downfall that I do see at this time is that the file sizes are too small to do anything beyond like editorial use. You can do web use, you can do editorial use. I don't think it's fit for commercial use yet. I think, on Mid-Journey, when I do a 2:3 aspect ratio, I'm getting 1024 by 1536. That's not large enough, in my opinion. It's a PNG, so I am able to interpolate the file up a bit. But yeah, I interpolate them up right now to like 2000 by 3000 and add a little grain, and I think they look good at that, but I don't really want to go much further. So I feel like I feel like there's still a little bit of time before it's used commercially. I don't think the files are big enough yet. I think everyone commercially is kind of holding off to see what happens with the lawsuit. Yeah, those are all my thoughts. My thoughts are, I'm using it, I'm embracing it, I love working with it, and I think that the court system will figure out, just like with Napster and Spotify, they will figure out a way to do it ethically. So yeah, check out Trust This Robot. Play in Midjourney. I use Midjourney over DALL-E. I've played with DALL-E a little bit inside of Shutterstock because they integrated with DALL-E, but yeah, I like Midjourney. So yeah, those are my thoughts on AI, and I think it's here to stay. And if you have not checked out Midjourney yet, and you are a photographer or finisher or art director, I think you should. I think you should. I think it's not going anywhere, and embrace the change. Change is scary, but the only thing that's certain is change. What's that saying? The only thing constant is change? Something like that. I don't know. Change is here. You got to embrace it. That's it. Those are my thoughts.